So I want you to just sit back for a second and picture something with me.
Okay, I'm ready.
Try to recall one of the oldest, most foundational stories in human history.
Oh, right. We're talking about the classics here.
Exactly. It's a story you've probably bumped into at some point, right? Maybe in a university philosophy class or, referenced in a movie.
We're just kind of floating around in the cultural ether.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about the allegory of Plato's cave. So just picture the setup for a second. You are a prisoner.
Not a great start.
Right. You are chained to a rock deep underground, and you're facing this blank stone wall.
And you've been sitting in this exact spot since childhood, right?
Yes, since childhood. Your head is totally locked into place. You can't look left, you can't look right, and you certainly can't turn around.
All right, you're just stuck staring forward.
Exactly. And behind you, there is this massive blazing fire. And between that fire and your back, people are walking along this raised walkway.
Like a stage or something.
Yeah, and they're holding up objects, statues of animals, carved trees, geometric shapes.
And the light from the fire casts the shadows of those objects onto the wall directly in front of you.
Right. And because you have never known anything else, you look at those flickering two-dimensional shadows, and you believe with absolute certainty that they are reality.
Like you have entire conversations with the prisoners next to you about the nature of those shadows.
Oh, totally. And the whole crux of the story is that one day, one of the prisoners breaks free.
They manage to get loose.
Right. They suffer the physical agony of standing up, turning around, and, walking past the fire.
They have to actually climb that steep, jagged path out of the cave.
Exactly. And when they finally emerge on the surface, they're just blinded by the actual real-world sun.
But then, slowly, their eyes adjust.
Yeah, and they see real trees, they see real animals, they realize that everything they thought they knew was just a shadow play.
It's the classic narrative, right?
Yeah, right. Education, enlightenment, progress, they're all defined by this singular motion, the escape from the dark cave of ignorance into the, blazing light of reality.
I mean, it is arguably the single most influential metaphor in Western thought.
Oh, absolutely.
It completely dictates our modern understanding of what it means to learn. We view the cave as the ultimate prison and the sun as the ultimate truth.
Like ascending toward the light is the only valid trajectory for a civilized mind.
Precisely. We assume that going up and getting out is the whole point.
But what if we've been reading it wrong for 2 millennia?
That is a massive question.
Right. Or worse, what if the core lesson of that 2,000-year-old story is actually a deliberate institutional omission?
Which is just a chilling thought.
It really is. What if the cave was never a prison to begin with, but rather a sanctuary?
And what if that blinding sun everyone is so desperate to reach was just a controlled narrative?
Yes. Like a managed fire built by people who want to dictate exactly what you are allowed to see and believe.
It is a premise that completely inverts our relationship with knowledge.
It really does. It forces us to ask whether our pursuit of enlightenment is actually just us walking into a more sophisticated trap.
And that inversion is the driving force behind the incredible material we are unpacking today.
We are dedicating this entire deep dive to exploring this brilliant, completely mind-bending novel by Tony Yustein.
It is such a phenomenal piece of work.
It really is. The book is called The Cave Was Never the Prison: Hidden Truth, Sacred Refusal, and the War Over Who Gets to Know.
Such a powerful title.
And I just want to state right up front, you need to get a copy of this book. It is a staggering piece of philosophical fiction.
Highly, highly recommended.
You can find Tony Eustein's biography, explore the concepts we'll be discussing today, and, grab the novel by visiting his site at thecode.wiki.
Definitely go check out thecode.wiki.
So our mission today is to completely deconstruct the radical premise at the heart of Eustein's world.
And it really is radical.
Think about your own life for a second. Think about your phone, the feeds you scroll through, the news you read.
It's a lot to process every day.
If you have ever felt entirely overwhelmed by information overload, or if you've ever paused and wondered exactly who is curating the daylight you see every single day.
Right. Who is managing the shadows?
Exactly. Then the concepts in this book are going to fundamentally change how you view secrecy, power, and the structures of truth.
Tony Yustein has engineered something exceptionally difficult here.
Oh, absolutely.
He manages to weave together classical Greek philosophy, the deep religious traditions of Alkaf, which is Arabic for the companions of the cave, and these really esoteric historical theories.
And he wraps it all up within this high-stakes thriller about who genuinely gets to act as the custodian of history.
It's brilliant. The narrative follows Dr. Layla Nessar.
Right, she's the protagonist.
Yes, she's an academic whose father, Rafik Nessar, was a brilliant but entirely marginalized historian.
And he basically vanished without a trace 12 years ago.
Exactly. But before he disappeared, he left behind this highly fragmented trail of anomalous artifacts and cryptic notes.
And these aren't just like regular clues to a disappearance.
No, not at all. They are pieces of evidence that challenged the very foundation of how academic and historical authorities operate.
So we follow Layla as she begins to decode this trail, right?
Right? Stepping out of the comfortable university lighting and into a shadow network of hidden archives, dead markets, and incredibly powerful institutions.
Institutions that are desperate to keep the truth under strict supervision.
Exactly.
So rather than just talking around the edges of this, let's step right into the friction.
Let's do it.
Let's start exactly where Yustein starts the novel, because the opening sequence sets the ideological battleground perfectly.
It really throws you right into it.
We are in Garrison Hall, which is this prestigious university lecture auditorium.
And the lighting in the room is described as glaring and sterile.
Yes. The exact kind of fluorescent lighting chosen by institutions that equate maximum visibility with total honesty.
It's a great detail.
Dr. Layla Nassar walks up to the chalkboard, takes out a marker, and writes a sentence that essentially acts as a declaration of war against her own profession.
Such a bold move.
She turns to the crowded room and says, most people encounter Plato's cave as a story about ignorance. The usual interpretation tells us that education is escape.
And the students and faculty are all nodding along.
Right, because it's safe. It's the standard curriculum.
But then she completely pivots.
She introduces a totally different cave from an entirely different archive of human memory. She brings up the tradition of Al-Kaf.
And to understand the sheer weight of what Yustein is doing here, we need to pause and look at that tradition.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So the story of Al-Kaf, the companions of the cave, is most famously preserved in the Quran, though it has roots in older Christian traditions regarding the seven sleepers of Ephesus.
Okay, right.
In this narrative, a group of young people are living under a corrupt, tyrannical, and persecuting empire.
So things are really bad.
Really bad. And to protect their faith and their truth, they don't fight a feudal war, and they don't assimilate.
They just leave.
Exactly. They flee the city and take refuge in a cave. And there, a divine mercy puts them to sleep for hundreds of years.
Wow.
The cave seals them away, protecting them from the toxic, violent age they lived in.
So they basically sleep until the empire crumbles.
Right. They sleep until the world outside has changed enough to safely receive their testimony without destroying them.
And Layla is standing in this bright lecture hall, pointing out the massive contradiction here.
It's a total paradigm shift.
In this tradition, the cave is not a place of delusion. It is a shelter.
Right. Sleep isn't a metaphor for ignorance. Sleep is an act of preservation.
Exactly. The cave is what protects an endangered truth from a false, corrupted reality outside.
She's essentially telling a room full of academics that the cave resists ownership.
Precisely. And then she introduces a third element that makes the room visibly uncomfortable.
Because she brings up Thoth, right?
Yes, Thoth, the ancient Egyptian deity of writing, knowledge, and records.
Which introduces this whole esoteric concept of the Thothic Hall of Records.
Right. The idea that beneath our ordinary, visible history, there is a hidden archive of human memory.
And this is where her father's research comes in.
Layla reveals that before he vanished, her father Rafik left her a notebook containing a diagram that completely shatters the Platonic model we've all accepted.
He drew Plato's cave, but with a massive change.
He added a detail that changes the entire geometry of human knowledge. Behind the chained prisoners, at the very back of the cave.
Where everyone assumes there is just a solid, dead wall of rock.
Exactly. Rafik drew a door.
That is just, I mean, it's such a brilliant image.
This is the moment in the book where my jaw actually dropped. Because think about what that implies.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's bring this down to earth with a modern equivalent. Imagine the standard interpretation of Plato's cave is like a highly curated museum tour.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You buy your ticket, you walk in, you follow the velvet ropes, and the official tour guide points you toward the brightly lit exit.
Right, they tell you keep moving forward. True enlightenment is waiting for you outside.
In the sun, which happens to be right next to the gift shop.
Exactly.
You are funneled toward a specific destination. But what Layla and her father's notes are suggesting is that there is an employee-only door at the very back of the museum.
A door in the darkest part of the room.
Yes, where the actual, unredacted, raw historical archives are kept. And the tour guides haven't just forgotten about it.
They have actively trained us not to even look for it.
Exactly. They've trained us to believe that turning around is a sign of regression.
What's fascinating here is how that perfectly conceptualizes the epistemological stakes.
Wait, epistemology, break that term down for the listener real quick.
Sure. When we talk about epistemology, we're talking about the fundamental rules of how we know what we know. Who decides what constitutes a valid fact?
Right. Who makes the rules?
Yes. And Yustein is showing us how those rules are rigged. Rafiq's notes argue that the classical Greek cave allegory we've inherited is actually a mutated surviving fragment of a much larger, much older threshold tradition.
So they chopped off the most important part of the story.
Exactly. Later readers, philosophers, and specifically institutional authorities privileged the idea of ascent.
Climbing out of the cave toward the sun.
Right. They privileged it for a very specific psychological reason. Ascent flatters the educated.
It completely validates the ego.
Oh, absolutely. It makes the philosopher, the academic, the politician into the hero. I climbed out of the darkness. I saw the truth. Follow me.
Wow.
But the suppressed truth, the ignored motion, is the turn backward. The missing door behind the prisoners isn't an exit to the sun. It's a door leading deeper into the earth.
Into the quiet dark, toward a hidden archive.
It is a door of witness. And turning backward toward that door requires a complete surrender of the ego.
Because you aren't conquering the truth and bringing it into the light to show off.
Right. You are sitting with it in the dark to keep it safe.
As Layla writes on the chalkboard, the cave was never the prison. The prison is enforced interpretation.
Which is just a brilliant line.
Yustein is asking us to realize that the moral meaning of the cave depends entirely on who built the doorway and who controls the fire.
The symbol of the cave has been deliberately split in two.
If you are conditioned to believe the cave's only a place of blind ignorance, you will naturally trust whoever offers to take your hand and lead you up to the sun.
Because we are desperate for stories of ascent. They validate our ambition.
Exactly. Turning back toward the dark asks us to give up the desire to own the truth. And frankly, the institutions that currently manage our reality absolutely do not want us turning around.
Which logically brings us to the forces in the novel actively preventing that backward glance.
You can't have an architecture of control without architects, right?
Exactly. And the antagonists Yustein crafts are incredibly unnerving because they feel so real.
They really do. They aren't comic book villains operating out of a volcano lair.
No, they are impeccably dressed, highly educated, fiercely articulate, and incredibly polite.
Let's talk about the Lucernal Trust.
Yes, the big bad of the novel.
Let's talk about their branding for a second, because Tony Yustein misses no details.
The branding is so good.
Their logo is a small gold disc crossed by a single vertical line. It represents the sun, but not a wild, raw, untamed sun.
The vertical line represents daylight with governance applied.
Which is just so creepy. The Lucernal Trust is the absolute embodiment of institutional gatekeeping.
During Layla's lecture, she notices a woman in the audience named Celine Arndt.
Celine is such a terrifying character.
She really is. Her official title at Lucernal is the Director of Special Collections and Historical Ethics.
That title alone is a masterpiece of bureaucratic menace.
Right. What does historical ethics even mean to an organization with unlimited funding?
It means they decide what history is ethical for the public to consume.
Exactly. Lucernal exists at every intersection where ancient knowledge meets modern influence.
They fund university grants, they sponsor archaeological restoration projects, they acquire massive private archives.
In the metaphor of the cave, they're the people who manage the fire.
They decide what objects get passed in front of the flames and therefore what shadows the public is allowed to see.
And they use people within the academic system to do their dirty work. They're joined in their philosophy by figures like Professor Adrian Pelling.
Oh man, Pelling. He is brilliantly written.
He's a classicist at Layla's University, and he is just vain, territorial, and completely obsessed with his own prestige.
There is this chilling moment later in the book where Pelling actually admits that 20 years prior he discovered a medieval manuscript that explicitly showed the rear door of the cave.
He had physical proof of the Thought-provoking tradition.
And he buried it.
Mm-hmm.
He suppressed the manuscript because he felt it, quote, invited the wrong kind of reading.
Let's really dig into Pelling's psychology there, because it's vital. Why does an academic, someone theoretically devoted to the pursuit of knowledge, hide a groundbreaking discovery?
Well, he says he thought the manuscript sounded like a badly written pamphlet you'd be handed at a train station by a conspiracy theorist.
Right. He buried the evidence because it didn't fit the respectable, neat, academically rigorous narrative he had built his entire career around.
Because if the back door of the cave was real, then Pelling wasn't an enlightened guide.
He was just a guy staring at the wrong wall.
Exactly. The fear of losing tenure, losing status, and losing authority makes him complicit in the cover-up.
But the ideology of the Lucernal Trust goes much deeper than just academic snobbery.
Yeah, it isn't just about protecting their jobs.
No, it's a deeply held, almost religious doctrine that they call the correction of the sun.
They genuinely believe that raw, unfiltered truth is fundamentally dangerous to the human species.
They believe it blinds the public, shatters fragile institutions, and inevitably causes violent fanaticism.
In their view, Plato didn't make a mistake by omitting the rear door.
They think Plato performed a necessary public service.
They argue that Plato purified a dangerous, wild, uncontrollable cave tradition by walling off that rear door and directing everyone toward an authorized, supervised sun.
It is a comprehensive philosophy of what they term managed revelation.
Managed revelation.
Yes. Lucernal believes that for a civilization to survive, it requires controlled, synthesized forms of truth.
They argue that too much light delivered too quickly burns society to the ground.
They don't study ancient systems of initiation and concealment to eventually share them with the world.
They study them to govern through them.
Exactly. They see themselves as the necessary burdened managers of human awakening. They dole out pieces of the truth only when doing so secures their own authority.
They take knowledge, which should be a universal inheritance, and they turn it into a credential.
Yes. But, I mean, we have to look at this objectively.
Well, actually, I want to jump in and push back here for a second because
Yeah.
this is where the book gets so brilliantly complicated.
Oh, definitely.
Let's really look at Lucernal's argument. Is Celine Arendt actually wrong?
That is the big question.
Look at our world right now. Look at the internet. When raw, unverified, massive dumps of hidden truths or alleged leaks hit the public sphere, does it lead to a peaceful, enlightened utopia?
Almost never.
It usually leads to pure chaos. It spawns dangerous conspiracy theories, mob mentalities, targeted harassment, and people entirely losing their grip on reality.
It's true.
If someone actually dumped the absolute truth of human history onto a server tomorrow, society might actually tear itself apart. So isn't some level of curation and institutional gatekeeping practically necessary?
That is exactly the uncomfortable moral gray area Yustein forces the reader to sit in.
Yeah.
Your point is entirely valid, and it's the exact argument Celine uses to justify her actions. The danger of fanaticism is not hypothetical, it is historically proven.
People do weaponize raw information.
They do. But here is the critical flaw in Lucernal's ideology, and it's the core of what Yustein calls the danger of the false sun.
Okay, lay it out.
Lucernal's solution to the genuine fear of public chaos is to collapse the distinction between true sunlight and an artificial fire they built themselves.
Oh, wow.
They stand in front of the public and claim, "We are protecting you from the blinding light." But what they're actually doing is locking the public inside a room, turning on a carefully managed desk lamp, and forcing everyone to call it sunrise.
That is a great way to phrase it. They aren't protecting the truth. They are making the truth entirely dependent on their permission.
Exactly. When you centralize the power to decide what is safe for the public to know, the people making those decisions will inevitably decide that the only safe truths are the ones that keep them in power.
Consciously or unconsciously.
Right.
And we see the human cost of that philosophy play out tragically in the character of Cassian Morrow.
Cassian is such a heartbreaking character.
He really is. He is one of Lucernal's top agents, but Yustein doesn't write him as a mindless thug.
Not at all. He's a brilliant material scientist who genuinely bought into Lucernal's mission.
He thought he was stabilizing dangerous artifacts to protect the public.
And we learn about this specific incident where reamers of the cave traditions were starting to spark a frenzy in the underground antiquities market.
Right.
To stop the panic, Lucernal ordered Cassian to use his expertise to create a forged safe artifact, a fake Rakim fragment.
They told him he was creating a conservation surrogate.
They justified it by saying, we have to give the market something to calm them down, so the real truth isn't hunted to destruction.
Let's look at the mechanics of what Cassian actually did there. He used isotopic manipulation, he sourced period-accurate pigments,
He essentially reverse-engineered history.
but in doing so, he literally poisoned the historical record. He buried the truth in order to quote-unquote save it.
He allowed his fear of what the public might do to turn him into the very jailer he thought he was protecting them from.
Cassian realizes, far too late, that protecting the public had become completely indistinguishable from deceiving them.
As Layla points out to him later in the narrative, the prison is whatever teaches you that the only exit is the one approved by the people who built the fire.
Man, that line gives me chills. So if we have these massive, well-funded institutions spending unlimited resources to actively hide the back door of the cave,
And co-opting brilliant minds like Cassian to build fake walls.
right, how do our protagonists actually find the door? How do you track something that officially does not exist?
This brings us to the physical breadcrumbs left by Layla's missing father, Rafik.
Yes. Shortly after her explosive lecture, Layla is sitting alone in her office. The hallway is quiet. Suddenly, an unmarked envelope is slid under her door.
She opens it, and inside are 4 incredibly specific items.
A heavy silver coin, a torn photograph showing a man's hand with her father's distinct surgical scar, a strip of completely opaque black glass that appears to be etched like a map, and a handwritten note from Rafik that simply says the cave was never the prison.
These 4 artifacts serve as the catalyst for the journey, and Tony Eustein's design of them is entirely unique.
They aren't just clues, they are philosophical tests.
Exactly. Let's look closely at the first item, the coin. The text refers to it as the RQM, or Rakim coin.
Layla knows she can't take this to a standard university historian, so she takes it to an underground antiquities expert, a man named Vartan Keish.
Varden operates in what the novel calls the dead market.
I love the concept of the dead market. Paint a picture of this for the listener. What is this place?
The dead market isn't a physical bazaar you can just walk into. It's a deeply insulated, decentralized network of smugglers, private dealers, and obsessive collectors.
Who trade exclusively in items that official institutions have declared non-existent or apocryphal.
Right. It's where history that doesn't fit the narrative goes to hide.
And Vartan Keish is a numismatist, an expert in the study of coins and currency.
And when he places the Rakim coin under his microscope, he immediately points out massive reality-breaking anomalies.
Because a normal ancient coin is basically a tiny billboard for whoever is in charge.
Yes, exactly.
It has the emperor's face, the year of his reign, a symbol of the local god, and a specific monetary value. It's a tool of the empire.
But Varden shows Layla that the Rakim coin has none of that.
Right, it lacks any issuing authority.
There is no ruler's profile, no date, no god, no denomination. Furthermore, the architecture stamped onto the metal is a composite.
It shows elements of ancient Ephesus, Alexandria, and completely unidentifiable structures overlapping.
Varden explains that structurally, this is not currency meant to be spent. It is a token of obligation.
It is designed to track a relationship, not a transaction.
But the most striking anomaly is the imagery in the center of the coin. It shows a dog lying in front of a cave entrance.
Now, anyone familiar with the Seven Sleepers or the El Kaf tradition knows about the dog.
Right. The dog follows the youths to the cave and sleeps at the threshold, guarding them for centuries.
But when Vartan increases the magnification on the microscope, he shows Layla something impossible.
The dog on the coin is not sleeping.
Its paws are stretched forward. Its ears are alert, carved with intense, rigid lines. It is actively guarding the boundary.
The novel refers to this dog as the witness outside the number.
It is present at the threshold, but it is deliberately not counted among the sleepers inside.
Exactly.
What does that actually mean, practically? Like, why does the dog matter so much?
The dog is vital to understanding Eustein's entire philosophy of custody. The dog represents the ultimate guardian.
One who protects the treasure, but lacks the capacity or the desire to own, spend, or consume what it guards.
Right. The dog doesn't want the gold inside the cave. It only wants to maintain the integrity of the threshold.
And this ties directly into the most fascinating concept Vartan introduces from the dead market ledgers, the idea of the refusal.
Yes, the refuse.
Okay, so Vartan explains that in these deeply hidden esoteric networks, there are keys that don't look like keys.
A refusal can be a physical object, like the strip of black glass Layla received. But it operates on a completely alien logic.
In a mechanical sense, Vartan explains that these ancient mechanisms were designed by builders who understood human greed perfectly.
They didn't just build physical tumblers and locks, they built psychological locks.
A refusal is a key that will trigger the mechanism to open a door only when the seeker actively, physically, and psychologically gives up the right to possess what is inside the vault.
I want to focus on this because it is such a brilliant subversion of the genre.
Oh, totally.
Think about almost every historical thriller, adventure movie, or video game you've ever played. Think about Tomb Raider or National Treasure.
The entire premise of the genre is extraction.
Right. The hero finds the ancient map, dodges the poison darts, solves the puzzle, unlocks the vault, and takes the golden idol.
Even if they are doing it to put it in a museum, the core action is acquisition.
They are taking the truth from the dark and owning it in the light.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the Platonic ascent we discussed earlier. The hero conquers the cave.
Exactly. But Yustein completely flips the script.
Let's use an analogy that might resonate with anyone who works in tech or digital media today.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Think of the concept of the refusal, like an open source software license, something like a strict copyleft agreement.
Okay, yeah.
You are allowed to access the source code, you can read it, you can learn from it, but the mechanism only grants you access on the legally binding condition that you cannot patent it.
You cannot copyright it.
Right. And you cannot claim exclusive ownership over it. If you try to privatize the code, the license revokes your access.
That is a fantastic comparison. Yustein is applying that concept to ancient physical architecture.
The key to the ultimate historical archive only works if you approach the door and prove that you are not a conqueror. It demands an ethical posture.
It is a profound deconstruction of the treasure hunt. Yustein is arguing that true archives of profound paradigm-shifting knowledge must be designed to protect themselves against human ambition.
There's a fantastic conversation later in the book between Layla and her ally, Halima.
Halima is a formidable, fiercely intelligent scholar of Islamic antiquities.
She looks at the artifacts and tells Layla, a refusal is an act before it is a thing. What are you prepared not to know? What are you prepared not to publish?
That line hits so hard. What are you prepared not to publish? For an academic, publishing is their lifeblood. It's how they survive.
Precisely. The true archive isn't a passive vault waiting to be looted by whoever solves the riddle fastest. It is a relational entity.
It actively tests the seeker. Are you coming to this doorway as a keeper, or are you coming as a thief disguised as an academic?
And that ethical test doesn't stay theoretical. It becomes agonizingly real as the characters follow the map etched into the black glass.
The artifacts lead them out of the safety of the university and onto a physical geographical chase.
They move from hidden collections in Athens to the winding streets of Alexandria and deep into the Egyptian desert.
And along the way, Yustein masterfully designs a series of locations that highlight the desperate traps of the human ego.
The geography in this novel is mapped to human psychology. Let's look at their expedition to Egypt.
Right, the black glass map initially seems to point to a subterranean anomaly near the Great Sphinx in Giza.
Which, if you are hunting for an ancient mythical hall of records, the Sphinx is the ultimate jackpot, right?
It's exactly where every internet conspiracy theorist, every alternative history documentary claims the secrets of the universe are buried beneath the paws.
It is the most famous historical threshold in the world.
But when Layla and her team manage to bypass the security and infiltrate the subterranean chamber beneath the plateau, they find it's completely empty of records.
It's not the Thoth-call, it is a correction chamber.
And the mechanism of the correction chamber is basically a massive ancient prank on human arrogance.
It essentially is. The walls of the chamber are covered in inscriptions left by older, wiser custodians of the real archive.
The inscriptions actively mock the people who come looking for secrets under the Sphinx.
The text translates roughly to, "The big beast is a decoy for men who need the secret to be famous."
And it issues a warning. Under the wrong paws, ask who benefits from the beast.
Yustein is pointing out the glamour of the obvious. The human ego desperately wants the ultimate truth to be located under the largest, most spectacular monument in the world.
Because discovering it there makes the discoverer feel grand. If you find the truth under the Sphinx, you become a legend.
But the true keepers of the archive knew that fame attracts thieves, conquerors, and institutions like Lucernal.
So they basically built a honeypot. They let the hungry egos, the emperors, and the treasure hunters dig endlessly under the massive stone cat.
Absorbing all their attention and funding.
Right. While the real records were moved through smaller, humbler, completely ignored channels.
It forces you to look at your own motivations. Are you looking for the truth, or are you looking for the glory of being the one who found it?
And that realization forces them to recalibrate how they read the map. They realize the path doesn't lead to monuments of power, it leads to sites of preservation.
They eventually track the true route to Ephesus, located in modern-day Turkey, which is the traditional historical site of the Seven Sleepers Cave.
But again, Yustein plays with visibility. When they get to Ephesus, the real clue isn't at the public tourist-filled shrine where everyone is taking photos and praying.
No, it's hidden in a drainage cut below a retaining wall, an area overgrown with weeds that you would only find if you're quite literally on your hands and knees in the dirt.
This hidden entrance leads them deep underground into a mechanism referred to as the calendar chamber.
And this room completely deconstructs the concept of timekeeping.
The calendar chamber is one of the most intellectually thrilling segments of the novel.
Oh, I agree.
Historically, in both Christian and Islamic traditions, the story of the sleepers has always involved intense, sometimes violent debates over how long they slept and their exact number.
Were there 3, 5, 7? Did they sleep for 300 years or 309?
But inside this hidden chamber, Layla and her team realize that the ancient builders didn't construct the room to settle the mathematical debate.
They built the room as a physical warning against the obsession with counting.
The inscriptions on the wall of this chamber are haunting. They read, "Those who counted fought over the beds. Those who watched the door kept the record."
And the central maxim? Do not correct the mercy of the unknown.
To understand the mechanism of this room, we have to look at how calendars actually function in human society.
Right.
Calendars are not neutral measurements of time. Calendars are tools of empire. An emperor dictates the calendar to assert dominance.
The year is counted from the emperor's birth or the founding of the city.
The calendar dictates when you pay taxes, when you harvest, when you go to war.
By putting the youths to sleep, the divine mercy of the cave actively removed them from a stolen time system.
They opted out of the empire's temporal control.
The chamber inscriptions read, "Do not wake the witness into the jailer's year." The archive outlived the Roman Empire precisely because it refused to conform to the persecutor's timeline.
I really want the listener to sit with this concept for a second, because it connects so deeply to how we operate today.
Yes, think about your own daily life. How often do we absolutely ruin a beautiful, mysterious, or profound moment because we immediately try to quantify it?
You see a stunning sunset, and instead of just watching it, you pull out your phone to capture it.
You post it, you count the likes, you track the engagement metrics. We try to put our entire existence into spreadsheets and data trackers.
We count our steps, our sleep, our calories, our friends.
Yustein is telling us that the moment you try to perfectly inventory the truth, the moment you try to nail it down, quantify it, and put a number on it, you strip away its actual wisdom.
Counting becomes an act of possession.
Yeah.
Possession inevitably becomes theft.
It is a profound critique of the modern hyper-empirical mindset that insists everything must be measured to be real.
The chamber teaches them that ambiguity is not a failure of knowledge. Ambiguity is a protective shell.
And this incredible philosophical journey builds toward the absolute narrative climax of the book.
Yes, the descent.
Layla, Halima, and a few reluctant allies, including the disgraced academic Jonah Vale, and even Cassian Morrow, who has defected from Lucernal, managed to follow the final route.
It leads them to an abandoned Ottoman rail depot, sitting in the middle of nowhere, which was built entirely over much older pre-Islamic foundations.
And right on their heels is Celine Arndt and a heavily armed Lucernal security team.
The protagonists are forced to drop down into a sand-choked shaft, entering the deepest layers of the earth.
And Justein's description of this descent is so vivid, you can practically feel the drop in temperature and the dust in the air.
As they move through the dark, they enter a space called the Acoustic Whispering Wall. This isn't just a hallway. It is a highly engineered piece of ancient technology.
Right. Explain how this actually works physically in the book, because it's fascinating. It's not magic, it's physics.
Exactly. The builders of this tunnel understood fluid dynamics and acoustics. The walls are covered in thousands of precise, asymmetrical grooves and ridges.
They act like the internal flutes of a massive instrument.
But the instrument is played by the natural thermal drafts of the cave system, reacting to the barometric pressure on the surface.
So when human beings enter the tunnel, their body heat changes the ambient temperature of the air,
which alters the speed of the drafts passing over the ridges. This causes the tunnel to produce specific, resonant frequencies, tones that sound eerily like human speech.
It's a memory architecture.
It is. They find an old cassette tape left by Layla's father, Rafik decades earlier. On the tape, Rafik's voice echoes over the hum of the tunnel, saying, "The record breathes with the reader. Do not take the lung from the word."
It proves that the archive isn't a dead vault where dusty scrolls are locked in boxes.
It is an active ecosystem of memory. It requires participation, presence, and harmony, not just extraction.
If you tear the stones out of the wall to take them to a museum in London or New York, they will fall completely silent. They only work in context.
And they finally reach the end of the line. The receiving chamber, the threshold to the sealed district.
The physical setup here is incredibly tense. There is a massive, seamless stone barrier completely blocking the corridor.
Carved into the center of the stone is a crossed-out sun, the image of the resting dog, and a blank, polished rectangle.
Suspended in front of the door is a heavy bronze mirror. The prompt for the mechanism is inscribed above it. Who opens for those not present?
Meanwhile, the physical threat is escalating. Lucernal's robotic drone crawlers, these heavily armored autonomous mapping machines, are literally grinding down the tunnel behind them.
The light of the managed fire is coming to burn the archive. They have mere seconds.
They try everything. They hold up the coin, they try to align the black glass map, but the barrier remains completely inert.
And then the realization hits Layla. She understands the ultimate truth of the threshold, the final manifestation of the refusal.
The door's not designed to open so they can go in and take things out.
The door's designed to open so they can put things back.
It is the ultimate test of surrender. The chamber demands that they give up the very things they brought with them to prove their own theories, or the things they intended to use to secure their own safety and prestige.
They have to prove they are the dog at the threshold, not the conquering emperor.
The sacrifices they make here are so character-defining. Adrian Pelling, the vain classicist who was tagged along and who built his entire life on academic supremacy, reaches into his jacket.
He pulls out the written abstract of the paper he planned to publish about this discovery, the paper that would have guaranteed his immortality in the academic world.
He places it on the ledge. He surrenders his pride and his life's work.
And Cassian Morrow, the Lucernal material scientist, takes out a hidden, encrypted data wafer.
This wafer contains all of his illicit, highly valuable copies of Lucernal's route extractions and algorithms.
He places it on a shelf marked "Misuse Confessed." He is returning the weapon to the earth. He is returning use to judgment.
And Layla places the artifacts her father sent her into the receptacle. She refuses the inheritance of ownership.
And because they actively refuse to possess the truth, the mechanism engages. The heavy stone barrier silently recedes.
They step inside the Thothic Hall. But what do they find? This is where Yustein completely shatters the reader's expectations.
They don't find glowing emerald tablets. They don't find alien technology or a weapon to destroy Lucernal.
They step into a vast, silent space, and in the center is a simple, massive basin of still water.
And reflected in the surface of the water, illuminated by the ambient light of the cavern, are names.
But look at the names. They aren't the names of kings or pharaohs or generals or the founders of empires.
The hall honors what it calls the uncounted.
The reflections show the names and quiet deeds of ordinary people whose small acts of preservation kept human memory from being entirely devoured by tyranny.
It lists a cleaner who wore purple shoes and hid a book.
It lists the dog who sat at the threshold.
It lists a mechanic who repaired a ventilation shaft so the sleepers could breathe. It is an archive of the invisible maintenance of the world.
It is breathtaking. They are standing in front of the ultimate secret of human history, the greatest archaeological discovery ever made.
And instead of pulling out a camera, instead of grabbing a relic to take to the surface to prove to the world that she was right and her father wasn't crazy,
Layla looks at the vast, staggering reality of the hall, turns to her companions, and simply says, "We leave."
it is a stunning, incredibly brave narrative choice by the author.
Yustein intentionally denies the reader the traditional dopamine hit catharsis of the treasure hunt.
The hall below the archive is revealed not to be a physical depth full of gold, but an ethical depth.
It demands that knowledge remain relational. As the novel states in its closing chapters, to describe its contents without describing its restraints would be to forge it.
The characters succeed, they survive the drones, and they are fundamentally transformed, entirely because they refuse to become the new kings of the doorway.
They turn around and walk away, leaving the hall perfectly intact, allowing it to continue its silent, uncounted work of preservation in the dark.
But of course, they still have to navigate the return. They survive the physical cave, but now they possess the ultimate uncounted truth.
How do you take that mindset of quiet preservation back up to the surface world?
Because the surface world is loud, screaming, and completely obsessed with content, leaks, and viral secrets. When they get back, the public fallout is borderline apocalyptic.
Lucernal doesn't just admit defeat. They fight a brutal information war. Celine Arndt's division releases a highly sophisticated, forged deepfake video of Layla.
They make her sound like a deranged cult leader ranting about magic caves.
The internet, predictably, goes into an absolute frenzy. Amateur treasure hunters and conspiracy theorists start swarming and vandalizing sacred cave sites all over the Middle East and Europe, looking for the haul.
It is the exact chaos and fanaticism that Celine warned would happen.
And this is where Yustein forces his characters to actually build a viable alternative to Lucernal's false sun. You can't just tear down an institution without offering a better structure, or you just get anarchy.
So instead of forming their own secret elite society to hoard the knowledge, which is what usually happens in these stories, Layla and her coalition do something radical.
They reach out to local custodians, rural historians, and religious leaders. Together, they author a document called the Threshold Principles.
The threshold principles are a fascinating blueprint for how to handle dangerous knowledge. It is a doctrine of shared, decentralized stewardship.
They create a distributed network of guardians that absolutely refuses centralized control. No single person and no single university holds all the keys.
And more importantly, they expose the true, violent cost of Lucernal's methods. Cassian's data wafer allows them to uncover Lucernal's buried human subject files.
This part broke my heart because it brings the philosophy down to flesh and blood. They find the names of the people Lucernal crushed to maintain their supervised fire.
Ordinary simple. They find the file on Kemal Arslan, a local surveyor who died in a staged cave collapse because he saw too much.
They find Emily Kaya, a night cleaner at an archive who was exposed to toxic threshold environments and left to die.
Layla and her team prove that the pristine, highly educated lineage of the false sun is built on top of a mass grave of the uncounted.
And Layla's ultimate revenge against the academic system that mocked her father is brilliant.
She doesn't write a sensational tell-all expose claiming to have discovered the secrets of the universe.
She writes a dense, quiet, methodical book called Repairing the Doorway. It doesn't give away the coordinates of the hall.
Instead, it advocates for the ethics of maintenance, for intellectual humility, and for the absolute necessity of protecting the unknown from those who wish to monetize it.
But I have to ask you, as someone analyzing this text, isn't this ending incredibly frustrating for the general public within the world of the novel?
And honestly, maybe even for some readers.
If I'm a citizen of this fictional world, and I hear rumors at this place, I want the secrets. I want the leaked documents. I want to know exactly what was in the hall.
That frustration is completely intentional. Yustein is actively weaponizing the reader's own treasure hunter instinct to make his final, most profound ethical point.
Remember the quote from Rafik, who was finally found recovering in a secure hospital after escaping Lucernal? He tells Layla, "The first failed awakening continues."
What does he mean by that?
He means that humanity has a tragic, repetitive habit. When a witness manages to cross centuries of silence to deliver a profound truth, the receiving world almost always asks first how to use that truth as a weapon of supremacy before they even bother hearing the message.
We want the Emerald Tablets not to learn from them, so we can be the ones holding them above the crowd.
We want the leverage. Yustein is arguing that true freedom isn't standing in the bright sun holding a stolen artifact and declaring yourself awake.
True freedom is looking at the complex systems of power around you and asking who is left outside the story you're currently telling. Who built the fire you are staring at?
It is an absolute masterclass in storytelling and philosophy.
Tony Yustein takes us on an incredible globe-trotting journey in the cave was never the prison, but the real journey is entirely internal.
It's a total, ground-up rethinking of philosophy, institutional power, and our deeply flawed, greedy relationship with information.
I cannot recommend this book enough. You have to go buy The Cave Was Never the Prison.
And please, check out Tony Yustein at thecode.wiki for his biography, his essays, and more of his brilliant work.
Seriously, go to thecode.wiki. If I may leave the listener with one final thought, building directly on Yustein's thesis, but applying it to the reality we live in right now.
Oh, this is important.
Think about the device you are likely holding in your hand or listening to this on. Look at our modern digital lives. We carry supercomputers in our pockets.
We have been granted unprecedented access to the sum total of human knowledge.
But we view almost all of that knowledge entirely through algorithms designed by massive, opaque, multi-billion-dollar tech companies.
We must look at our screens and ask ourselves, are these algorithms our modern false sun?
That is a terrifying and necessary question.
Are we sitting in a digital cave, believing we are perfectly free and enlightened simply because the screen in front of us is incredibly bright and endless?
All the while, corporate gatekeepers, our modern lucernal trusts, manage exactly what revelations, what news, and what history we are allowed to see.
They curate the fire to optimize our outrage and our attention for their profit.
Perhaps the only way to find our own Hall of Records today is to practice Justein's act of refusal, to intentionally disconnect,
To actively stop counting our likes, our metrics, and our followers.
to walk away from the artificial, managed fire of the feed, and embrace the quiet, uncounted mercy of the unknown.
And maybe then, if we can sit quietly in the dark for just a moment, we can finally turn around and look for the door behind us.